You're nice and everything, but we can't follow what you said.
Okay, so let's do the expense report first. If you look on page 2, I'll give you the account number.
The expense report, okay.
Yes, that's
Doesn't
for-
say expense. I'm
okay.
sorry, but I didn't realize
Okay.
that.
So it's 32-60-120-100-002. And if you look in the balance.
32-60-, 2 of 4. Okay, the FEMA Sandy thing?
No, 100-002, it's the next one below
Proceeds of
it.
sales, okay, got
So
that.
if you go all the way to the balance.
Do you have that,
column.
Ann?
No, I don't have that. Okay.
So it's on the second page
It's on
of
the
this
second page
one,
of this, okay,
Okay.
thanks.
just about halfway down.
So
It
that,
ends in a O2.
that doesn't mean that's the balance in the fund, does it?
No. And
That's
that,
just from the proceeds
in
from the
that,
sale of
in
vehicles.
that bucket of funds within the fund.
Yeah. So
Okay.
what's the balance in the fund,
So,
the
that,
CNRE fund?
so that's more like, $1.2 million in total.
All right, and that's
That's the last number on
Okay.
the back page.
Page 4,
1.193738,
Yes, I
blah, blah,
see
blah.
that.
Okay.
okay. So Ann, your question was, what's the balance in the CNRE fund? It's 1.1,
So that's right.
Right, okay,
it's 1.19 million,
okay.
right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
correct?
Right, but
But
we're
it's
talking
encumbered.
specifically about the sale of vehicles.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha. All righty. So we have
But
20,
the important thing is that there are sufficient funds for the request that's being made.
yeah, okay, so there's
That's my question.
20,000 in there from the sale of vehicles, and we're dipping in for 15 and change,
Mhm.
right? Okay. I think you did a lot of homework,
Yeah.
Joe.
Thank you.
Totally behind you, because that's your Board of Finance working hard for you.
Yeah.
Well, these guys right here are making it happen, so.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I hear a
Ready?
motion?
Move to approve a special appropriation in the amount of $15,742 from CNRE Fund 32, account number 32-60-120-100-002. Proceeds from the sale of vehicles to an account to be established titled 2019 Public Works Department Equipment.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second. John seconded.
I have a motion. John second. Any other conversation before the motion before us? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved. 400.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Special appropriation for NSEP grant, $20,311.36.
And so Chief Finkelstein is here to go over this request with you.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi there.
If you recall, this is recurring every year. The state provides money to towns in the EPZ, which is the towns that need to support millstone, have EOCs that have to support drills and be ready should there be a millstone incident. They provide money in a pool, and each town applies for grants inside of that pool. So this is money that if we applied for $2, somebody else is getting the rest of the money that we normally would have gotten. So there's a pool of money, they divide it up based on those applications. So what we put in for, two pieces. One piece, which is not on your agenda, is for part of my salary, which is a benefit to the town to pay for the EMD salary, which is part of what the Millstone Grant does, but also for equipment. And that equipment is to assist us with our EOC operations, evacuation planning, and everything really related to emergency management. The good thing is the items that are for purchase here, 100% not town funds. This is funds provided to us by the state. And they're items that we probably would have had to dip into town funds at some point to buy, so it certainly defrays the impact on the taxpayers by going through this fund to get funding for those. So you'll see on your list we have a couple items. It was also cut in half, and that was because the grants that were applied for exceeded that pool of money. So there were cutbacks to several of the towns in our equipment-related expenses.
Are you talking about the back now when you start talking about halves?
I don't have the same piece of paper, so I don't know what you're.
Yeah, that's the revised budget sheet.
Okay, so the revised is 20,000. We had actually put in for $40,000 worth of equipment, but it was cut back to 20. So we were handed that from the state, and we came up with the reductions The vast majority of those reductions are a trailer to house the traffic stuff that's on that list, cones, signs, so on and so forth. We have found that we have a substantial need for road closure signs that we can readily deploy quickly rather than having Public Works come in while they are still an asset who needs to come in. We also, as the police, at times need to get those right out to events that may happen, be it a large-scale event, be it an incident where there's a road closure, there's a criminal incident where we need to divert traffic or close the roads. So this allows us to do that with cones and signs that we don't have currently at this time. The laptops, if anybody here has been in the EOC during a millstone drill or other drill, we have people that represent all different forms of government, schools, etc., and we are trying to provide them with communication devices, and that being laptop computers. To properly staff that EOC, we require them to be there for extended hours during that day. So access to emails, internet, other issues, as well as the web EOC, which I can get into if you need to, which allows the state to update information, is beneficial. So it's just a communication device. It stays in the EOC, but allows us that functionality that we need to have everybody fully communicating during an incident. You also have 2 more items on there, I believe. You have the, well, actually 3. I think you have the projection. You have a monitor, which simply is just a large screen TV. What we're trying to do is right now we have a whiteboard that's up there. It's very old. What we're looking to do is I'm trying to reduce paper costs. So if we have an inject, and when you do a millstone drill, that fax machine goes off probably 20, 30 times with an inject that they need you to put out there. Well, I want to put that right up onto a screen rather than have to make paper copies for everybody there. So trying to save money, but also make us operationally more efficient by having that, that monitor up so everybody can see that. You also have 2 fail-safe, items. Right now, that is going to go in the police department and in dispatch. What that is in the event of a large-scale emergency and communications outage, this is a backup through Verizon to allow us internet and wireless access should our local lines go down. Because right now, we in the police department, for example, we have Atlantic Broadband. If they lose service, we lose internet connectivity, which in turn reduces a lot of our ability to function with some of the things we need to do. Having this system is a backup to that system, so that allows us to maintain our communication abilities. I think that was everything else.
Couple questions?
Yes, absolutely.
So the grant is for, how much money do we get from the grant? 20 something?
Well, it's 20,000 for equipment, and it's about, I don't have the personnel part in front of me. That's about 20,000 also. That is based on a formula, based on salary. We don't have any input to make that greater or lesser.
Right, okay, so we get 40 or something like that?
Exactly.
Plus or minus?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to understand process a little bit. Was this equipment included in our 1920 budget? Did
No.
we?
No.
No, so this need came up after the budget season closed?
No,
Did we know this was
No.
coming?
No,
No.
Lisa, these are ongoing things to staff the EOC. I don't put these in the budget because I'm going to get funds from, I'm going to go after funds from Millstone, not the
Okay.
town of East Lyme.
So that's what I mean by process. I'm just trying to understand that. So I know this is covered from a grant. I get that it's not an additional tax burden. I'm trying to understand process, though. So are we saying if something's covered by a grant, we don't, I mean, maybe I'm just not thinking it through, but we don't include it in the budget process if it's covered by a grant? Is that true? Or, I mean, it could be.
Well, but I also, I guess to add into that, it's also opportunities, because when the grant comes out every year, myself, Chris Taylor, Julie Wilson sit down and say, what can we get to increase our operations out, and that is outside of the budget, because certainly we're going to be less apt to burden the taxpayer with these. And again, just understanding these are 100% handed to us.
It's all good.
But historically, like, these particular grants, we do not include as part of our budget process.
So here's what I'm just trying to think it through. There's always something new that comes up, right?
I hear you.
So on our revenue sheet, right, in the budget, we have all kinds of grants in there, right? We have ECS and
Correct.
Pequot and all that other business. So I'm just trying to understand why this appears to be managed a little bit differently. But
So-
first of all, am I off base? Is it managed a
So
little
I
differently?
think so in terms of, we typically do budget for the projected salary that, grant that we're gonna get from this particular source. However, other items such as the equipment, we're not really sure that we're gonna get them or how much money. So we always go through a special appropriation process for
And-
this
and-
piece of the grant.
And Lisa, it is quite different than other grants because this grant, we don't have flexibility. So Pequot grant, all of those, you have the ability to decide how those funds are expended inside of your budget. In this grant, we are told by the state, this is what you're putting in for. These are the pieces of equipment that would be qualified and satisfied through that.
Right.
For example, last year, put in for 2 radios to communicate with other towns should we have, grand failures. Not things that we identified during the regular course of business, but certainly in a millstone incident would be things. I'll go into just with the new building. Outfitting the EOC, for example, some of that's gonna come from emergency management funds, the ability to do that, not put inside of our budget because these are extra grants that come in, but solely for the EOC outfitting, and that's it.
Yeah, I understand that grants are earmarked for certain things, right? Like like pilot and LOSIP and all that. We have to use that for certain stuff. I guess I'm just a little confused as to why we don't identify what we're gonna do, what we wanna buy. We know what the grant will cover and what it won't cover, right? So in February, we expect that we're gonna get this grant, right?
Well, that's when the application process takes
All right,
place.
but I mean,
About February is we start
historically
applying
speaking,
for
we
it.
know we're gonna get the grant. Okay, yeah. I mean, tell me if I'm not thinking this through right, but I don't know why we wouldn't just put this in the capital plan as a cost, but then you know how you color it? Funding source, something different? It just feels like a bit of an anomaly to me. I mean, from a bookkeeping standpoint, I'm not saying that there's any gross expenditure or anything like that. I'm trying to understand
so-
why.
And
we're-
that's why we go through a special appropriations process when we, when we get the completion of the grant process cycle. So we submit an application, it gets reviewed, and like in this situation, we were looking for 40,000, we're getting 20,000, and so then you get to the point where we get awarded the grant, and then once we get awarded the grant, we go through the appropriations process.
And then we figure out how we can spend it.
Yes.
We have,
Well, when we apply for the grant, we're identifying what we're gonna, what our intentions to spend the funds on.
right,
But with that reduction, we had to then revise that budget, revise our purchase or
Right.
needs assessment, so to speak, and say, this is what the most needed items are on this list, and this is what we can, not do.
okay. So our other grants, I guess, are just not like that.
So the grants that we identify in the budget, they're primarily the state program grants that we're receiving, and they're part of the projected revenues that, are part of our budget. And
Operating budget, no, not.
Our operating budget, yes.
But some of those grants, like LOSIP and stuff, there's only certain things you can use that on.
Okay, so LOSIP, so the way we handle the LOSIP is when we do include that particular one in the CIP and
Right.
color code.
All right, so you
yeah.
can understand my,
Yeah,
question.
I understand it. That one is a little bit more specific because that's part of the overall process when the state provides us with what our funding is going to be from them for the fiscal year. This is not included in those grants. This is like above and beyond, if you will.
so none of this stuff was in the capital plan, right? Okay. And you pared back what you wanted from 40 to 20.
Right, the majority of that was a trailer, so you look at the cones, signs, equipment, we had put in for a trailer to transport those. We're gonna do without that because we thought that the cones and equipment were far more important than having the trailer, and that allowed us to knock that
Okay.
off.
All right.
And some other small things.
I think I understand, thank you.
Any other questions about the grant application before us? John, questions?
No.
Okay, so then do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve a special appropriation in the amount of $20,311.36, approved by DEMHS to revenue account 01-04-400-401, parentheses, NSEP grants, and budget account 01-70-725-224-006, parentheses, NSEP equipment, to cover the cost of purchasing the above listed equipment for the EOC.
Thank you. I have a
Second.
motion and I have a second. Any other conversation about the motion before us? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so moved 400. Ratify, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Item D, ratifying budget transfer between departments.
still don't know why we have to.
Because
For
when we
these.
approve the budget, we approve buckets of money in
I
certain
know, but they're
places.
within the department, so
Yep.
I don't care what they do.
But the charter
I mean that in a
says,
nice way,
this-
as long as they don't overspend.
the charter says we have to, so we have to. Did you have anything that you'd like to share about this?
So actually, this is the last group that we'll have for 6/30/19 because, we closed off getting, taking care of all of our bills last week.
Great.
So that's it.
So total transfers I see is 175,000.
That we did,
That's for last year.
correct,
Okay.
yeah.
So is that, do you monitor that typical? Do you, I mean, like what does?
So I just thought, I said, gee, you know what, if somebody, I wanted to, I figured that would be something maybe somebody would want to
Like
know
me.
what the total for the year was, so I just went through the other ones and, totaled.
So
it
is
for you.
that typical, the typical number
You know what,
don't-
I think it's coming down. I
Yeah.
really do.
with tighter budgeting?
Tighter budgeting and, yeah, I thought that was good, because I think we've been over 200 in the past, so
Okay.
I looked at this as being a little, much better.
Any other conversation? Hearing none, do I hear a motion?
Motion to ratify department transfers in the amount of $8,569.48 processed for fiscal year end June 30th, 2019.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion, second, any other conversation about the motion before us? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstained, so moved, 400. Thank you. All right, CNRE fund description, discussion, analysis, et cetera, et cetera.
So in your green folders, I put a revenue sheet, which is 2 pages, and then all the expenditure accounts that are set up in the fund. So I set this revenue sheet up. I mean, I've been doing it for quite some time so that I can track everything by category, what goes into the fund. And one thing I'll point out to you on the revenue sheet, if you look to the accounts, kind of like in the middle of the page, they start with 3208400001, and there's like 8 different accounts labeled there, and they all begin with OTI, which is operating transfer in, and with the exception of the last account, so accounts 1 through 6, well actually 1 through 5. So for these, the town up to like 6/30/09 was really making an effort every year to transfer funds into the CNRE fund for different buckets, like public safety, town projects, public works, and, well, the Board of Ed projects, that's a little different. But, so every year, like the way the capital planning was done, it would say like, okay, and this year we're gonna purchase, another trash truck or a dump truck, and we would figure out how much money we needed to put aside in CNRE to be able to purchase the truck. Well, what was happening is, during the budget process, those were big numbers, so they were always reduced, and we weren't setting aside enough funds for us to be able to make the purchases. And so that's why we started with the acquisition program, because we started the acquisition program in 2010. So that's just kind of like explaining a little bit about why the CNRE was set up and what its purpose was. It was to set aside funds so that we could eventually make certain purchases. And then over time, it's evolved for other items. But this is the story of all the revenues, and I felt it important because for tracking purposes. So then, with regards to all the expenditures, there, it gives the of course, the description, the amended budget transfers, and what's been expended to date, what the balance is, and then there are 3 other columns, one of them being authority, source, and recommendation. So, for example, the very first account is revaluation. So we all know that for the, so we're in 18, we're in 19, 20. So during 2021, we're gonna begin, we're set to do another revaluation. Our plan is to go out to bid within the next 60 to 90 days, so that as we go into, well, no, I'm getting confused, after the beginning of the first of the year, so that as we go into the budget process, we're gonna really know how much more money that we're gonna need in CNRE. So that's why the, it's noted authority is the budget, the source is the general fund, because we actually budget funds in the general fund to transfer to CNRE for purposes of doing the valuations at some point in the future, and this is ongoing. Then the next one is vehicle for building official. So back in 2015, we transferred $7,500 in from the sale of vehicles to purchase a used vehicle for the building official. So we have a remaining balance, and so the recommendation on that is we should just close that and put those funds back into the sale of vehicles account. Because like this evening, we took money from there so that Public Works would be able, so this is like, so in my mind, rather than having several accounts remaining with like all these small balances, let's just figure out where these balances belong and put them in those specific buckets. And that way, it'll really, give us an idea of like, oh, we have like,
We're sweeping up.
and then we'll know what we have in categories, so that when we go into the budget process, we may say, you know what, we have, a healthy balance in the CNRE fund. Perhaps instead of including, budgeting for these in the general fund, we'll use CNRE funds to make certain capital projects that are within the categories where the funds are available. So I've really gone through every account, did the research, to document what approved, things and where they came from, and yes. So some of them, we've run some grants that we received for various purposes through this fund, and there were little balances left. So if the funds for the grant, if we didn't spend everything, we only get reimbursed for what we spend. So if there are little balances, those should just be put into like an account designated as balance not to spend, because that's the only way we can remove it from that, budget account. I mean, that's just my idea on how to make it so that we really know what's available to us for specific purposes, rather than keeping all these small balances open.
I think this is very useful.
So
I love that you have the source here and the authority. It's great.
And I mean, like, some of them I had to double up on notes and so on, but anyway, so this is kind of where we are. So now that I've gone through and at this particular level, I would have to, I think, get like the small balances that are left into like an overall bucket. And I want to point out, if you look on the revenue sheet, there are, oh, I wish I would have highlighted this, but I didn't. Okay, so if you look at, in that same OTI area, account number 8, where it says East Lyme High School turf field, and there's $25,000 there. Okay, so if you remember at a previous meeting, when the board was here, we talked about that with the board, that they had $25,000 in some special revenue fund that they had there, that they were going to turn over to the town for us to put in CNRE to designate that for, the future of the turf field. So it's a start. So what I plan to do for this, like, this is a revenue that came in, but I'm gonna put a budget account there and just, designate it as that. So every year, if the board gives us additional funds, it'll build up in that account. And this way, when we review the CNRE fund and you look at the budget accounts, you're gonna see that that's available.
Or conversely, when they don't allocate it, and we know what the expense is gonna be in the future, we'll be able to see how deficient we are.
You're right, that's certainly, it can be, so it'll be, if we scrub the fund and get it organized, then it's gonna be a better tool for everyone going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another one, if you look at the 006 account, OTI,
Mhm.
that is pool roof escrow. So that sum of money, $129,898, was deposited to the CNRE, and this is what it's supposed to be used for at some point in the future. So this is another item that I'm gonna set up a budget account and put that there so that it makes it a better tool for us. Because it's kinda like half and half, like things that are in the, like things
Right.
that we put revenues in there for, but if we don't have a budget account to identify it, then they're never gonna match.
Right, totally.
So right now, it's kinda like, yeah, so we're trying to map it all out so that it really makes sense.
It's a great job.
And we know what we're gonna have available to us. Like, I need to go to that next phase, but this is where, the first place to start, in which made sense
Yep.
to take care of that.
So we clarified earlier that there's about $1.2 million in the CNRE account. Is that what you thought was in there before you did this exercise? Is there an actual account someplace sitting out there at some?
Well, I looked on the balance sheet to see what we had in terms of cash and fund balance in the fund.
Okay. So now this bottoms up kind of matches that tops down?
Well, it does and it doesn't, like, I have to make it better, more perfect, because some of the balances in some of the budget accounts, so when we first started with the acquisition program, we would go through the appropriations and we would running the appropriations through the CNRE fund. However, with that said, when we finished the first 2 leases we did, we did it so that as we spent the money, we would send it into the financing company and we would do a note for that amount. So let's just say, for example, we had a $500,000 plan we were gonna do for the year. So let's just say like in the first few months, we purchased $250,000 worth of vehicles. Well, we would send all the documentation in and then would do a note for $250,000. Then the remaining $250,000, let's say 3 months later, we would spend that. Well, in those first 2 years, if we didn't spend the total amount, then we didn't get the money for it. So some of these accounts have maybe a $5,000 or $7,000 balance. So those funds just have to be removed to unspendable, because it's not something we ever received a revenue for.
Okay.
And so now we do not do the acquisition plan like that. We do the note, funds are put in an escrow account, and what we spend, we get back. And that's why sometimes, like in the later years, we've had remaining balances.
So if you don't use the funds in the CNRE, if it's allocated for a certain item and you don't use it in a certain window of time, you lose it? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
No. For the acquisition plans.
Yeah.
That
Because we had one of these items come before us.
Right, but in those plans, now the way we're doing them, when we close, the full amount of the deal is put into an escrow account for us. And as we spend, we draw down from it. So in this case, we're obligated to spend the full amount. In the earlier years, that's not how it was done. And it was very difficult. And so like now, when I went through some of these accounts to scrub them, there were remaining balances. Well, we never received money for those balances, so we shouldn't spend it.
Mhm.
So those just have to be removed to non-spendable.
About how much do you think that's gonna total?
Yeah.
I mean, just swag it. I'm not gonna hold you to
Maybe
it.
20, maybe 30 at the most.
So that's money we left on the table, essentially. Because we can't use it.
Oh, we can use it.
No, we can't.
No, she just said we can't use
No.
it.
Because it's never
So in
been
other words,
funded.
we never actually signed a lease deal for what we didn't spend. But because when we went through the appropriations